was on before. That's better? Yeah, great. Hello, everybody. My name is Camilla Fenning from the international climate change think tank E3G, and delighted to be here to be moderating this session on consigning coal to history, a really ambitious statement which framed COP26. But it needed to be ambitious. Coal is the greatest source of carbon emissions, and without tackling this, we will fail to keep global warming within the 1.5 degrees target. The focus on coal at COP26 helps secure the Glasgow Climate Pact commitment by all countries to accelerate efforts to phase down unabated coal. And I'm delighted to welcome here today representatives from countries who have signed the No New Coal Compact: Grenada, Chile, New Zealand and Denmark, and they've kindly agreed to share their reflections. And we will also welcome, towards the end of the session, Damilola Ogunbiyi, CEO of SE for All and Special Representative of the UNSG for Sustainable Energy. But first, I'm really delighted to welcome Minister Stewart, Secretary of State for the UK's Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department, to say a few words on assessing the impact of consigning coal to history and its ongoing
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. In fact, overly kind, as I've been promoted to the Secretary of State when I'm the Minister for Energy and Climate Change. Surely Secretary of State's just a matter of time, but currently it awaits me. It's 1 year, as has been said, since the world came together in Glasgow to reach that historic agreement on coal. The first time ever that coal had formed part of our cover decision. And I'm proud that we're marking that today and that real progress has been made across the UK's COP presidency year. When my colleague Alok Sharma, who of course was the COP president until I think the end of the first day here technically, when he became president, the UK took it on, just 30% of global emissions, global GDP, was covered by net zero pledges. It's now more than 90%. And I think that's just a fantastic transformation of position and sets up the theme of this event, which is, of course, all about implementation, getting things done. None of us could have anticipated when all parties were agreeing to a coal phase down and the UN No New Coal Compact was instigated, that war would return to Europe. But Putin's brutal and illegal war has not undermined energy transition. Far from it. It's thrown into stark relief the dangers of relying on fossil fuels, particularly those controlled by hostile actors. And the data is clear as well, that despite recent marginal increases in fossil fuel use since the invasion, the transition continues apace, and that the future lies in renewables. Power sector emissions are lower in all G7 countries, bar Japan, against 2019, and are outweighed by the growth that we've seen in renewables. Coal use is trending down across the majority of the OECD, with projects being shelved or cancelled as investors recognise the risk of stranded assets. And the IEA has just found that there is no current need for new coal to meet existing demand, even with the disruption to current supplies. So I'm pleased that a year on, momentum continues to gather. More and more countries are recognising that renewable energy is faster, cheaper, more secure route to a sustainable energy future. There are now 12 countries in the UN No New Coal Compact, 168 members of the Powering Past Coal Alliance, and 39 members of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership. 65 countries have already committed to produce no new coal, with 32 in a position to do the same. Now, beyond the COP presidency, the UK is playing its role, I'm pleased to say. Historically, of course, coal has been dominant in the UK's electricity mix. But look how far we've come. 97% reliance on coal in the 1950s, over 70% in the 1980s, just 2% last year. we will deliver coal phase-out by 2024, 100% clean power by 2035. And we've worked closely with countries this year like Morocco at New York Climate Week, who I'm thrilled have joined the compact, and with organisations like E3G and Wilton Park. And we're leaning into renewables, a world leader in offshore wind. From my constituency in rural East Yorkshire, I've seen the transformation of the economics of offshore wind as it comes down to being around the cheapest, may well soon become the cheapest form of energy available in the UK. We have enough installed capacity to power 10 million homes and a clear pipeline to double that by the mid-2020s. We're aiming to move from 10 gigawatts currently to 50 gigawatts by 2030. Thanks to many people in this room, amongst others, the end of coal is in sight. Just 6 countries, China, India, Turkey, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Mongolia, could remove nearly 90% of the remaining global pipeline. And just as the costs of inaction are profound, we've felt that acutely around the world this year, the benefits of action are vast. A recent Oxford study said our central conclusion is that we should go full speed ahead with green energy transition because it's going to save us money. And they meant trillions. Investments in renewables have seen a 367% greater return than fossil fuels over the last decade. The choice in this decisive decade is clear. Coal is an industry in decline, and we must work collectively to shift resources and investment from coal to clean. And I'm looking forward to hearing from this excellent panel on how we can take this programme of work forward even further. And I want to thank SE for All, who are taking much of this important work forward from the UK's presidency. We'll start with a short video, and thank you, Camilla, for moderating this panel.
The end of new coal power is in sight. Only a handful of countries are still considering building new coal power plants. In fact, over 3/4 of planned new coal plants have been scrapped since 2015, and that's not just in the global north. Over 1,000 gigawatts has been abandoned rather than built over the last 8 years. That's equivalent to the total installed electricity capacity of the EU. Only 34 countries are still considering new coal plants. Of these, 16 countries have only one plant still under consideration. The vast majority of countries have turned their backs on new coal power plants. They know that burning coal is the biggest source of emissions causing global warming, and that to avoid severe climate change, coal power has to end in OECD countries by 2030, and by 2040 elsewhere. Then there are the massive health costs of coal. Those in the vicinity of a coal plant are more likely to suffer from heart disease, stroke, lung cancer, and chronic pulmonary diseases. It is estimated that 900,000 deaths per year are caused by proximity to coal plant emissions. All governments agreed to the Glasgow Climate Pact calling for the accelerated phase down of unabated coal. Instead of coal, we're seeing the rapid growth of new renewable energy projects, producing clean, cheap power. This is because it's now clear that the world is moving beyond coal. Finance for coal power is quickly drying up and is being replaced by clean energy finance. Coal power plants built now are unlikely to provide a return on investment, only able to survive by sucking up taxpayers' money. International investors want to put their money into countries that prioritize clean energy, while the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy could create more than 10 million jobs worldwide by 2030. And given electricity generated from renewables is now cheaper than coal in most countries, shifting from coal to clean is good for a country's economy too. Across the world, old coal-fired power stations are becoming a part of history. The future is here, now. Renewables are the new normal. the end of new coal is in sight. No new coal.
So thank you. Thank you for watching that video. That's the first time it's been shown outside our own organisation. I'd like to, I hope that was inspiring, and I'd like to use that as the kick-off for the panel. I'd like to formally introduce the panel. We have Minister Karen James, Minister for Climate Resilience, the Environment and Renewable Energy from Grenada. Juan Pedro Searle, Head of Climate Change from the Ministry of Energy, Chile. Ambassador Kay Harrison, Climate Change Ambassador of New Zealand. Needs to be. Thank you. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, so everybody has to do it like this. And finally, the Climate Ambassador of Denmark, Thomas Anker Christiansen. Very warm welcome to you all. And I'd like to start by asking Minister Karen James and then Juan Pablo Searle to briefly share what opportunities have emerged for your countries, Grenada and Chile, in making no new coal commitments and accelerating your coal to clean transition. So Minister, first you, please.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. First, let me start off by saying thank you for the kind invitation to participate in this event and to bring some perspective on this. I'm sorry, so I have to speak a little louder until the mic. But I just want to say thank you so much, express my gratitude. Coming from a small island developing state, Grenada, where we don't have any coal, but yet still we have made that extra, we'll go that extra mile to contribute towards, the no new coal and consigning coal to history. And I just want to say that this is a year in which we have seen some of the most damaging effects of climate change in every corner of the world, including the Caribbean region. Yes? And it is clear, therefore, that the commitments that were made in Glasgow, we have to act on it now. It is now or never. We have a saying in Grenada, is now or never, and I believe that slogan is extremely fitting for this discussion that we're having here today. And one of the commitments that were made in Glasgow was to phase down coal with the overall objective of consigning coal to history to guarantee that low carbon future that is necessary for our very own survival. And so, indeed, coal has already been consigned to history in small island developing states like us. And for us, it is not about phasing down coal. It is about phasing out of coal well before 2030. In this critical decade, for sure, for SIDS, coal must be consigned to oblivion as we continue to experience the devastating effects of climate change. I would say that one of the things that Grenada has really done towards this commitment over the last 12 months is to ensure that we have a place for renewable energy. And as you heard in my portfolio, this is the first time that renewable energy has been given its own feet to stand on, really. We now have a ministry. I can also vouch for my energy sector, the energy division within our ministry, that they have been doing a good job in the National Ozone Unit as well. The Montreal Protocol is one of the areas that we have made tremendous efforts and we have exceeded in that towards our contributions to phase out HSCs and fossil fuels. We have created the legislative framework in terms of ensuring that we have energy efficiency labeling and that sort of things. So while it might look as small steps for the more developed countries, for us, that is all that we could do for now. And of course, continue on in the fight of implementing and encouraging those big emitters to implement, because we feel it the most. Yes? So I would say that it is really clear to our people whose lives have become harder and nearly impossible due to the use of coal and other fossil fuel that we must have ambitious global climate action. We must. For us as small islands, and I can't stress it enough, that we feel it the most. and we are not the ones that are responsible for what we are experiencing. Yes. So me being here today is really to show that while we have not directly contributed to what we are faced with, we still have a commitment to ensure that we hold those accountable and that we do whatever that we can to phase it out and to act now. I think we owe it to our global citizens to do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Juan Pablo.
So thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So to your question, well, we decided last year to join the No New Coal Compact and also the Powering Past Coal Alliance because we have a history to tell, which I think is worthwhile for others to know, and it's a unique process in Chile. So very briefly, in 2019, the main energy utilities decided together with the government to phase out coal even earlier than 2040, okay? And there was a very, I would say, concrete phase out coal phase out, schedule. And we are very proud now to convey that this schedule has been very successful, and we have even accelerated the original deadlines. So we now have shut down or phase out 8 plants. One more could be added this year, and for 2025, around 65% of our coal installed capacity will be added to the other ones, will be either shut down, and a small number of plants will be reconverted. So reconversion is also an alternative to us, and why? Because it's really challenging. I mean, you cannot, one of the lessons learned is that you cannot just phase out coal, and you need to have alternatives. We have a lot of renewable in the system, but we need also to, I don't know how to say it, but we need a lot of infrastructure in transmission, in energy storage, I would say some small tweaks in our legislation for this, new investment to have a market already. And in terms of what, drove the private sector to take these decisions, there's a mix of different reasons. Economic reasons, of course, and somebody said it now that, renewable energy in Chile is now cheaper than coal, okay? So that one reason. The other reason is that because of environmental standards, there was no way for some companies to continue, using coal because there was a lot of opposition in some specific spots in the country because of this, very old plants. So that was another reason. And I would say the third one is, of course, it's a mix of international commitments, the Paris Agreement, but also local regulations. So we just passed our climate change law. It's now in place, and it's very interesting because there will be a requirement for the private sector to limit their emissions. So there will be some benchmarks, and if those, depending on the level of those benchmarks, coal doesn't have any role to play. Gas probably, but very little. So we're very into renewables in the system. So. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I think it's really important about the mix of decisions and the layering of all of this to get to the place that Chile got to. I'd like to turn now to our ambassadors from New Zealand and from Denmark, just to ask them, what were the sort of key decision points, the sort of pivot points to help you decide around no new coal? And is there sort of something that you could point to that you would like to share with this audience around, how you might take that step and what you gain from it? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us. First and foremost, I remember coming out of the Paris COP21 negotiations at about 6 in the morning and returning to my room and putting the TV on, and someone said, "Oh, well, that's the end of coal." And And I thought, really? Like, we just wrote words on paper, right? But actually, those signals are really critical, and the signal from Paris and the signal from Glasgow were really very clear messages to our industry and to our government about the future. It wasn't terribly difficult for us. We have already 80 to 90% renewable electricity generation. We do have some industry that for process heat uses coal, but what you can put things in place once you've got that signal and you know that this is going to be something that happens over a phase down. You can put things in place. We have the emissions trading scheme, so we're pricing carbon, but equally we have a fund that industry can apply to and co-invest in new boilers, etc. And so you provide the incentives and support, both the incentives in terms of regulation and price, but also the support in terms of transition. And I think the other thing that I would say is that we were looking at our people, and our people in some of our regions, their employment, their livelihoods, their lives are based on certain industries, and we knew that they needed to be cared for, and so investing time and effort in the transition for them was going to be critical, not some sudden change down the line. All of this, of course, premised on having a determination to reach net zero by 2050.
Thank you also for having Denmark in this panel. And before addressing your question, I just want to salute the UK government and the UK COP team for their leadership in bringing all of these initiatives that in their sum really help set the end of coal on the global map. And I think without the Glasgow conference and without that concerted effort of the whole team, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today. So thank you for that. And of course, the symbolism wasn't lost on us that the home city of James Watts and the origins of the steam engine was also where we put coal in the grave. Denmark with Grenada, we were the facilitators for the mitigation section of the Glasgow Climate Pact. And we were jointly complicit in actually putting the phasing out coal language into the section of the pact. So by mobilizing all the action around coal, you also opened the political window for us then to put it into the text. And it is, you know, with political text, once something is on paper in there, it is very, very difficult to get it out. And that's what some countries were faced in the final hours of Glasgow, but fortunately we were a broad coalition of countries that managed to stand together, and although the language was slightly changed, the message was clearly heard all over the world. And I think the message in your video about no new financing for coal being available for public or private sources is true. I've spent the last year traveling the world and as part of my mission working on realizing that promise to end coal, and wherever I've gone it is clear there is no new funding for coal. And just today actually the international community has signed a big deal with Indonesia that was announced in Bali 3 hours ago by world leaders, that there's a new just energy transition partnership that catalyzes the phase out of coal in Indonesia and the build-up of renewable energy. And in that political agreement, there is a direct quote from the Glasgow Climate Pact. So there is a straight line, and those who believe that COPs don't matter and what we do in the action space don't matter and what's in the final declarations doesn't matter, I beg to differ. It does actually matter a hell of a lot. So thank you, UK, for that. Now, as to your question, just very briefly, 30 years ago, Denmark made the first investment in the world in an offshore wind farm. a small one, a very expensive one. We didn't know how to regulate it. We didn't know how to finance it. The technology wasn't mature, etc., etc., etc. 30 years later, today, we have launched the Global Offshore Wind Alliance with the joint ambition of the signing on countries to mobilize 380 gigawatt of offshore wind by 2030. And the journey we've gone through from that first small wind farm to today has gone through our national utility, which was called the Danish Oil and Natural Gas Company. It was 90% coal-fired 20 years ago, and 10 years ago it changed its name to Ørsted and is now the world's largest green utility that invests in offshore wind all over the world, including running large offshore wind off the shores of the UK. And I think that journey that Ørsted did from being a coal-based utility to a global offshore wind developer runs through the end of coal in Denmark and the change of the underpinning economics, going from renewables being very expensive and very difficult to operate to actually now being the lowest cost and the obvious choice instead of coal. So we are really making great strides. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thanks for mentioning the Indonesia Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is fantastic to have today, and actually noticing that it's elevating the discussion around coal at COP27, despite it not being so much on the agenda here as perhaps it was at COP26. So really fantastic news today. So just thinking around, we talked about how, small countries can maybe help put messaging into bigger countries, bigger kind of coal-dependent countries, and we've talked about sort of, the politics around the Glasgow Climate Pact, etc. Any of you on the panel want to sort of talk through, you've made your no new coal commitments. What more can, positive countries that are championing no new coal do to encourage others to get on board with this initiative and to see that this is the way forward? And just while I give you a second to answer that, just to mention that there are only 34 countries that still have, potentially kind of coal plants waiting to come online. And, of those countries, 16 have only one coal plant in waiting. So, we really are in a position where there can be some domino effects and we can get rid of new coal, the new coal pipeline. But any ideas from the panelists in terms of what more we can do to encourage other countries to show this commitment and build momentum? And indeed, if there's any one or two comments from the floor, very happy to take those as well.
Thank you. Well, I think there are three things. One is these partnerships that, in fact, I don't think there are any countries in the world that want new coal. I think every country would like to be on its transition faster than it sees the pathway in front of them, if you know what I mean. And so these collaborations like the Joint Energy Transition Partnership are critical. So bringing the finance together, it may be not just a matter of finance, it might also be a matter of regulation or restructuring of the power sector in a country, and we need to help one another with that. So yeah, bring the money together, work in partnership, and thirdly, one of the things that we would like to do, my personal vision is to close a coal-fired power station somewhere, really want to do that, is to use the market. So use Article 6, which enables the enhancement of ambition by allowing countries that cannot afford what might seem otherwise less expensive transition activities like shutting down a coal-fired power station, installing solar and retraining the workforce, bring carbon investment into that and enable it to happen everywhere. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll have the Minister from Grenada and then Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to reiterate from what I said earlier, I think that there is no need for, I don't think, but I know that there is no need for new coal investment in coal. There is a need, however, and a global obligation to permanently shut down coal plants and coal infrastructures. And from a perspective of a country, again, that has no coal, it is clear that energy security, renewable sources of energy, and the economic, social, and environmental arguments and imperatives against coal are all aligned to a no new coal future and to an urgent agenda to act now and act ambitiously and decisively. And as my other panelists had mentioned, there is an avenue and opportunity for us to have partnership, public-private partnerships. There is some certain things that a government like mine, for example, cannot do, but yet still from a policy perspective, we can create that legislative framework and encourage the private sector to get involved and to invest more in renewables. Yes, and I've heard my dear panelists from Chile stating that we need to provide the alternatives if we are saying no new coal. And the alternatives are there, and they are feasible, and they are affordable. And one of the main things that I think that we need to also implore is to ensure that whatever we do at the technical policy level, it trickles down to the persons who you want to get to be more smart and to shy away from fossil fuels. So we need to contextualize the conversation of what we're doing here now down to the grassroots level so that everybody understands and everybody plays their part. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Thomas.
Three quick things. First of all, when it comes to creating the enabling environment and the policies and the regulation, we are engaged in bilateral energy transition cooperation through our energy agency with a total of 24 governments, including 13 in the Global South. And it's at the core of this, which is run through our energy agency, is to help countries understand how to scale down fossils, including coal, and how to build a renewable energy-based energy system, how to bring it into your grid, how to balance the grid, how to do power modeling. I mean, these are quite technical engineering things, but most engineers are raised on running energy systems on fossil fuels. And the skill set that it takes to run an energy system on renewables is actually quite different. So that needs to be taught, that needs to be learned, and probably one of the things we need to scale even through universities, but we are doing it in our bilateral cooperation. The second thing you need is finance. And here, especially the multilateral financial institutions need to really up their game. And I think there was a lot of talk, is a lot of talk at this conference about the need for the MDBs to step up and really do a step change in the support they give to developing countries in realizing that potential. And then the third is to bring in the private sector, because the private sector has a lot of expertise in actually also financing this, in making the transition speedier at a lower cost, in working with governments, with the regulators, and with the MDBs. And the private sector isn't always your enemy. They can actually also be a strong supporter also of developing countries here. So I think in that sense, coal doesn't need to be the first choice for any country anymore. Thank you.
See in the Indonesia Just Energy Transition Partnership, specific public sector companies actually mentioned who are going to kind of match the public funding, which is really great. So João Pedro, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah. Well, I think four things. One is in our case, in our example, to be more outspoken, to share, our experience. I think it's very unique because it's a voluntary agreement, which is kind of operating as if it was binding. One thing. The second thing is that the minister mentioned is how to address the challenges. I mean, no new coal, of course, but what are the alternatives and how to overcome the huge challenges ahead. It's not easy, but it's doable. The third thing, I guess, it's a very interesting point of view from New Zealand is where are the incentives? Other than, regulation, of course, to allow for more renewables in the grid and to facilitate, to enable that. But I guess instruments, and I think carbon pricing could be a good vehicle, not to be the solution, but I think it's a good tool to finance the part of the transition. That's one thing, Article 6, of course. And the last one, I guess, it could be a good figure for the no new coal compact, maybe to explore and this is linked to be more outspoken on different experiences, is to look at this figure of ambassadors for no new coal. I mean, to try to figure out who could play some roles in our regions and in conveying messages. And this, I mean, this can happen. It's doable. It's not exempt of challenges, but you can do it. And it's, I mean, you can easily get the buy-in, at least from communities, because communities don't want more coal in their backyards. So.
Thank you. It's doable. Thanks for that optimistic message, which I think is great. I'd like to invite to give some closing remarks Damilola Ogunbiyi, who I introduced at the beginning. Do come up to the speaker here. Thank you. CEO of SE for All and the UNSG Special Representative for Sustainable Energy. And Damilola is going to say a few words, particularly around the No New Coal Compact and where we're headed with that. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. Sorry for joining late. Being Energy Day, I'm running like a headless chicken everywhere. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me and speaking about this really, really important topic, which is basically ending coal and having no new coal. Hopefully most of you know that a year ago we had a high-level dialogue on energy, which was the first time in 40 years we had a real discussion on energy at the UN, which is quite staggering because we have COPs every single year. And that linkage between energy and climate, I think this compact particularly really brings that together. Better than mostly all these compacts. So at the high-level dialogue, we decided we were going to champion something called energy compacts. A lot of people are like, why energy compacts? We have NDCs, we have all these other programs. And we tried to make it clear to them that we don't have a lot of agreements that are linked directly to energy. And this is just, one of them. By countries signing up to no new coal, there's a host of other benefits that come with it. One that we really have to talk about very seriously and sincerely is that you can't really tell people to stop something when you can't fund the alternative. So we need to be really honest with ourselves. On my continent that receives 0.6% of all renewable investments that currently happens in the world, which is Africa, I don't know how you're expecting countries to leapfrog or all these other things that have been said today. So it really is a case of financing. And we're really hoping the countries who sign up to these compacts, we can look for ways they can finance. Because it's not like people don't want to do the right thing or they don't understand that coal is bad. It's the fact that they might not have the funds or the technical assistance to really drive things forward. So these aren't conversations of, UK, I'm going to put 3 million here, or, Denmark, I'm going to put 4 million. It's using your combined authority to attract billions into these economies. I'm really glad we have Chile here as well. It's important for us to understand that countries have to do development. They have to understand and make sure there's enough energy for their populations and their industries, but they all have to do this in a climate-friendly way. These are three key things that there's no one in the developed world has actually achieved yet, but for some reason it's going to happen in the developing world. That is the challenge that we have now, and all these three things have to come together. So again, I heard part of the discussion. It's exciting discussion, but none of this makes any difference until we translate this on ground. And we make sure that we don't force countries to go back into dirtier fuels that have committed to no new coal because personally they have no choice. So thank you so much for listening. Please, if you are a country who wants to sign up to any of our energy compacts, I have my colleague Kanika behind who can tell you a bit more about the UN process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Damilola, for making time on such a really busy energy day, and indeed for all of the panel. I know everybody's rushing around today, so really grateful for your time. And just the sense that I'm left with is that, climate leadership from countries such as yours can really make a difference. We can build momentum. No new coal is something we can build momentum around, not just for individual countries, but for all of the globe, which is what we need at the moment. So thank you very much, and thanks again to all of you on the panel.